Hello and welcome to the Holographic podcast. I'm your host, Tony and I'm joined by my buddy, my friend, my partner in crime, Kyle, the salty dog. How are you, Kyle?
Doing good, Tone. Happy to be here. It's fall in Vermont, and I got no complaints.
Fantastic. I love Kyle's attitude.
You
And
know what?
I love
I
Kyle's
actually have a
hat.
lot of complaints, but I'll
I'm
save it for another time.
I'm sure Kyle
I
always
don't
has a
know
lot of
why I
complaints.
said that.
Quite all right.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So we have a lot to talk about today. We're going to discuss hallucinogens, hallucinogenics, the past, the present, the future, the possible future of hallucinogens. A very important topic, and we'll tell you why we think this is a very important topic. Before we get into that, I just want to mention one thing relating to the holographic universe, relating to the overall theory of the show and overall theory of today's episode. So last week we spoke about creating your own reality. And this week, real quick, I want to talk about our perception of reality. So in the holographic model, you have an implicit reality and an explicit reality. An implicit reality that we can't necessarily perceive very well, and an explicit reality that we create. And that explicit reality that we create isn't much of reality at all. The point I want to make is that we don't perceive a lot of the true reality. So a way to think of it is a pie. If the whole pie is all of reality, we only perceive one small slice of that pie. And that's true for different animals. You know, each animal on this planet has a different way of perceiving reality. You know, different, dogs hear more than us, and different animals smell more than us, and different animals see less than us or more than us. So every animal perceives reality differently, and our slice of this reality pie is very thin. So I just want to put that out there before we get into this show, because I think that it is relevant to what we're about to say. Kyle,
Yeah.
how much of reality do you perceive?
Well, before we go with that, I get it though, because we all want a bigger piece of pie.
That's it's exactly right.
Is that what you're saying?
So true.
Bang.
Boom.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I 100% agree with that. Do I perceive a lot of reality? Yeah, but it's all filtered. It's all through
Right.
my own filter, which
Right.
actually closes the door on tons of reality. And that filter has been formed through experience, survival instincts, biases based on that experience, biases based on monetary issues. So, do I see a lot of reality? No. I'd like to think that I'm more perceptive than a whole lot of people out there. There's definitely, I'm going to put myself in, one of the upper echelons as far as, Americans go.
You'd like to think that, wouldn't you, Kyle?
I would like to think that, actually. I
And
would
you know
like to
what?
think that, but I'm no llama, and I'm not particularly creative, so I'm missing that.
I think you're creative. I think different people
Not creative.
express creativity in different ways. And so you're creative in a lot of ways. So the idea that being creative has to do with making like a picture or art, I think is false. Creativity for me has a lot to do with my body. As a martial artist, as someone who is an athlete, aren't you creative on skis? Aren't you creative on a snowboard?
I know what you're saying. No, but you know what?
All right,
I
well,
just
fuck
thought
it.
of something.
Hey, fuck it then.
No, you're right though. You're right. You know where I've been creative? You know where my creativity has been popping out lately?
Where's that?
I've been able to. I'm making my girlfriend laugh.
Nice. Oh,
a lot.
That's perfect. Your
We
creativity
laugh.
is in performance. Comedy is the spoken word.
I run with that. I could run with that.
All right.
It's true. That is one of the places where my creativity does manifest itself. And I enjoy it too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's just as valid as any other creativity. Prove me
Thanks, buddy.
wrong. Prove me wrong, internet. Just kidding. Please don't talk to me, internet. I'm sick of you. Anyway, so as we do this show on the internet, yeah, you're welcome. Now we're going to get into our main topic, which is hallucinogens, which is it's a controversial topic because there are currently in our society taboos against many drugs, and in the United States, most hallucinogens are illegal, and so it's a controversial topic. So we're going to talk about it because it needs to be talked about more. This is something that's very important and needs to be talked about more as our society progresses. So that's what we're going to do. I've studied a lot about it, and one of the main people that I've read and I've read his stuff. I've never met the guy, but his name is Terence McKenna. Kyle, you're familiar with Terence McKenna?
Terence McKenna.
So, so
You and your
his
dad, Terence McKenna.
so his brother Dennis and Terence McKenna, Dennis McKenna and Terence McKenna did a lot of research, and so a lot of the things I've read are from him. Although I've read a lot of different things too.
What's the
So,
name of that seminal work that he did?
well, there's many of them. The seminal work that I consider his seminal work is Food of the Gods, but you might be referring to the Archaic Revival.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah, the Archaic Revival is the most common, and that's a collection of things. It's actually interviews and different things he wrote. But Food of the Gods is a book that he wrote that really lays it all out. If you want to read something from Terence McKenna, read Food of the Gods. Amazing stuff. So a lot of the things I talk about are his theories, and I'll mention that these are theories. These are his theories. So one of his main theories is the so-called stoned ape theory, which actually reading different things from different people, I think it's slightly misleading to say a stoned ape, and I'll tell you why in a second. So when humans evolved 3 million to 1 million years ago, and then many anthropologists agree that we became modern human 100,000 years ago, 200 to 100,000 years ago, we became modern human. So in that time, 3 million to 100,000 years ago, there was a lot of changes from hominids, from pre-humans to humans. And one of those big changes is our consciousness is going from a so-called animal to a conscious human. And Terence McKenna's theory is that hallucinogenic mushrooms was a catalyst that changed our minds so we became conscious. And it's called the stoned ape theory, or some people call it the stoned ape theory. But reading about it and reading on different things of people doing hallucinogens today, it actually could have been microdosing. So microdosing is when you take a small amount and it changes certain things inside you slightly, but you don't get stoned. You don't have a hallucinogenic trip. You just have a slight reaction to it. So in my opinion, these early humans eating these hallucinogenic mushrooms, by the way, just to go back a little bit, early humans were foragers, and they were omnivores, and they were opportunists, which means that they tried everything. They tried this food, they tried that food, and if it didn't work, they puked it up and they moved on. So it was inevitable that early humans would have tried hallucinogens and different things like that. But they might not have taken it in large doses. They probably took it in small doses. And so those small doses may not have got them high. It just may have changed their biology and helped them to evolve their consciousness. Now, there's a lot of stuff about that. You can go read it yourself. I don't want to go a ton into it, but one thing I do want to mention that I don't know if I've talked to Kyle about, this is really interesting. I was just reading about it, is that hallucinogens, psilocybin, which is the active compound in a certain hallucinogenic mushroom that is the most prolific hallucinogenic mushroom, psilocybin, is scientifically proven to increase your synapse connection in your brain and increase your visual acuity. Psilocybin is proven to increase your visual acuity. So when you take hallucinogenic mushrooms, you actually have really it's interesting. It's hard to explain. I'm not going to talk about.
It's not hard to explain to anybody that's ever taken it.
Right.
They're going to be like, oh yeah.
Right. So you have this visual acuity that it just increases it. And so as humans evolved, if this is true, if this theory is true, it would explain why so many humans need glasses. It would explain why so many humans need corrective lenses, because we evolved with in symbiosis with this mushroom, with this psilocybin, and it helped our consciousness and it helped our eyesight. So our eyesight did not evolve. So our eyesight did not evolve the same way as the rest of our bodies, because it was being enhanced. And when we stop taking this, when modern humans now don't take it as much, we don't have this visual enhancement because this plant was doing it for us, or this fungus was doing it for us. So that's a possible reason why so many humans need corrective lenses, is because our eyes did not evolve the same way as the rest of us, because of the hallucinogenic psilocybin was helping the eyes. That's a theory. Kyle obviously isn't on board with this yet. We'll have to talk more about it. Wait. You're not into this, huh, Kyle?
I don't know, man. That sounds a little hogwashy to me, but here's what I will offer. I really, really do jump on board with the parts of the stone ape theory in the advancement of consciousness.
Okay.
And I will give a little anecdotal information, because that's going to be my primary role tonight, is giving anecdotal information, which is to say, I took a lot of acid and I took a lot of mushrooms for a very short amount of time. And I'm not ashamed to admit it. Something I did. It's something I had. It was great. I mean, you can't get busted for something you did, right? Anyway, the consciousness theory, the idea that you said, where we sort of were able to elevate ourselves, very, very believable to anybody that has dabbled in this kind of stuff. Maybe not anybody, but to a lot. And I won't go deep into it, but one of the big takeaways for me, through my hallucinogenic experiences, through my experiences with psilocybin and LSD, light and heavy, was the idea that I had a real profound effect on the things around me. It elevated my consciousness in various ways, but one of them was the most simple way of saying, I am a force within my own miniature universe. You know what I mean? Almost like kind of like related to a butterfly effect is what I'm going for.
Mm-hmm.
If I wasn't there, the whole fabric of sort of space and time and the things that unfold from there, like ripples in a pond, I was the stone that was thrown at any given moment. You know what I mean? So that was something that I came to the realization of. There was also alternative moments where I was just like, I'm nothing, I'm a speck of stardust, and I'm completely meaningless. And that is also true. I hate to keep on going back to all of our recurring themes, but our recurring themes are all cyclical and telescopic. If you look at it from a bigger scale, we are ants in a meaningless cosmos, you know? But if you look at things on a smaller scale, one of the things that I was able to take away was it elevated my consciousness in that I was maybe not a master, but I was a physical and mental force within my universe. And without that, I might be in the same place doing the same thing, but that taught me something. At those particular moments, I said to myself, you can be a force for good, you can be a force for evil, you are a force is basically what I came to. And that was part of, I thought, an elevation of my consciousness. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I would say a similar experience with me. It was, a self-reflection experience. And so for me personally, I almost relate it to The Last Dragon. You remember the movie The Last Dragon with Sho'nuff, the Shogun of Harlem? And
yeah.
the guys
I remember it a little bit.
Well, you made me think of it because you said, I'm not, you said it made you think that you may not be the master, but you're in charge of your own destiny. Well, in the movie, the Bruce Leroy is looking for the master, and he finds out that he is the master. And so that's a similar thing that happened with me, but at the same time, it was very ego checking. It was like, hey, you're not, it checked my ego that
Good point.
you're skillful and you're the master of your destiny, but you're not in charge. You're part of this greater
Yeah.
universe.
I might be
So,
able to push over a tin can or a person, but I could walk out in the street and get hit by a Mack truck.
right, right. So imagine an early human having these experiences, because again, to say that they didn't is ridiculous. It's inevitable that early humans would take these things and have these experiences. So this very well could have been the spark that sparked our greater consciousness to have these experiences and say, oh wow, I'm a part of this greater universe. And then that self-reflection created our higher consciousness of culture and things like that. So so okay, so I'm going to move on a little bit. I don't want to dwell on that. So if you fast forward a bit, you have society and culture that is being created, and humans are evolving, or humans have, let me say humans have evolved. Modern humans have evolved. They're creating society and culture. They're doing different drugs. Drugs are a part of our culture, whether you like it or not. Whether you think drugs are good or bad, or legal or illegal, they are a giant part of our culture, a huge part. Almost everyone I know is on some sort of drug almost every day, whether it's caffeine, whether it's tobacco, whether it's sugar. And if you don't think sugar's a drug, you better think twice, because sugar is a crazy, crazy drug. Refined sugar.
Some say that it's actually the worst out of all of them.
Right, absolutely. So you have these drugs, like the minor ones, so-called minor ones, and then you have bigger drug. You have heroin, and you have reefer, marijuana, and you have the hallucinogens. There's and then the pharmaceutical drugs, and then there's these.
Don't forget alcohol, buddy.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
all I'm saying is that it's worth a mention
It's
in
not,
that, and we can dip back into that. But alcohol somehow,
no, I'm
as the
getting
most
into it.
destructive force in the world, somehow gets a pass.
No, it's not getting a pass. I'm going right into
Not
it.
from us.
It's gonna bring me to my point. And so you have the pharmaceuticals, okay, and then, as Kyle pointed out, you have the big fella, the elephant in the room, alcohol. Now, what happened is as humans culturally evolved, they created and found alcohol, and they drank a lot. Big part of human culture, big part of the creation of our societal structure. And so alcohol is somewhat of a downer, and alcohol is somewhat of a synapse number. Whereas hallucinogens increase synapse connection, alcohol numbs synapse connection. So,
Thank God for that.
but what it was but as human society got bigger and we lost contact with a lot of these hallucinogens and shamanic rituals, so shamans were a big part of hallucinogens. As we lost contact with shamanic rituals, we needed something. We needed a connection. We needed a drug. We needed a connection with the other, and alcohol was a big part of this. And so alcohol became a big thing because you could drink it and it was readily available, and it took you to a place that was separate from reality. So it was a mind changer. It was right. It's an escape, but it was a mind changer, but not in the way that hallucinogens increased your synapse connection. It deadened it. So Terence McKenna's theory is that change from hallucinogens to alcohol and other drugs like that really is what set our culture on the path that we are in, which is a dominator style culture, a culture of war, and a culture of have and have nots, a culture of dominators and dominated. And so his contention is that if we get back to a shamanic ritual of hallucinogens, we can go more into a partnership type society and not be pushed away into this dominator type society. And it's because of the drugs we take. It's because of our connection with the drugs and how they change our mind.
It makes perfect sense when you think about it. I mean, and I'm generalizing very much here, but generalization and stereotypes just come directly from reality. You think of your average bar scene, and it's it has the potential to be confrontational, violent, dangerous. I mean, there's a whole nother side of it, which I enjoy very much, or did enjoy very much over the years. Everybody's friendly, you get happy, you hook up with people. It's really kind of great. But there's the other side too. You know, there's a lot of sort of like, I don't know how to explain it. I don't have to explain it. Anybody that's been there knows, you know, it's sort of like, it's volatile. Okay. It's not elevated. It's sort of, it taps into our baser instincts. Whereas like, and I've never been to an acid party or something like that, or I've never been to like, you know, a mushroom party. Well, that's actually not true, but generally speaking, they're not nearly as common. But going back to what you were saying, that one of McKenna's theories is that if there was such a thing, anybody that has had any kind of experience with it would be hard pressed to imagine such a thing as being anything but the polar opposite of a bar scenario. Yeah. There would be extraordinarily slim chance of violence or volatility. You know, I mean, minus, you know, sometimes crazy people shouldn't be taking that.
There's always the crazies.
Always the crazy. But you know what I'm saying? Like,
I do know what you're
this
saying.
goes, again, my anecdotal information is just that my experience always lended itself to sort of openness, peace, not love, but maybe love, but just, you know, harmony, I guess I would say. And I don't mean it in a PC kind of way. I just mean it in sort of folding into, instead of fighting against the current of a river, you're flowing with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of a base of these theories, is that hallucinogens and cannabis kind of put you to flowing with the river, and then drugs like alcohol and tobacco and caffeine get you flowing against the river. And so the legal drugs in our society today are alcohol, tobacco, and caffeine, and the illegal drugs are hallucinogens and cannabis. We'll talk about that more in a bit. So the other part of McKenna's theory is that it has to do with religion. So according to him, the original religion, the baseline religion, was these shamanic rituals and shamans dealing with hallucinogens and people taking hallucinogens, whether it's mushrooms or peyote or ayahuasca or whatever the tribes had, then would connect with the universe and the greater, you know, the greater other. I'm going to say other because I can't put a name on it. It's the other. And so that to him was the generic religion. And as we lost connection with those hallucinogens and gained a connection with alcohol and other drugs, that turned into the modern religions. It turned into our, you know, it went to, you know, these polytheistic, the gods, Conan and Karam, and then that turned into monotheism and a single God. And that, so our modern religion, according to him, is our attempt to find the other, to be connected, but it's been bastardized. It's evolved into this weird dogmatic cult-like thing because of the drugs that we take. And so that's another aspect of this hallucinogenic connection, is that was the original religion, and the religions we have all stem from that. So if you're a Christian and you think that you're the cock of the walk and you're the one true religion, well, you probably came from a mushroom religion back in the day. That's what it evolved to. That's McKenna's theory, and I'll tell you what, I 100% agree with that, based on my personal experience, based on what I've read, based on looking at different people, meeting different people around the world. I 100% agree with that theory, that that's where our religions came from, is our attempt to be connected with the universe. And the people in power, the people who are in charge of these religions, have turned them into these cults.
And tying it back to sort of what we were saying about, you know, having more of a positive, elevating experience on one hand, and having more of a confrontational and or, you know, de-elevating experience on the other hand, when you talk about, you know, hallucinogens versus alcohol, you know, just to keep it simple, let's think about how much pain and suffering has been caused in the name of religion. You know, it's a direct sort of result of it. And I think we were going to get into it. Again, I don't know when you were going to jump on it, but one of my theories was just how all of these hallucinogens are beneficial to society in fomenting consciousness, a peace-like consciousness, as opposed to a warlike consciousness. You know what I mean? And it folds right in there because, let's face it, even though religion, the words on the paper say, you shall not, you will, you won't, and the rules are pretty clearly written down, how much violent awfulness has been done in the name of religion and continues to be. Here we are in 2020, even right now. There's such a disconnect between what's actually written and what people talk about when they go to their prayers and their sermons and what people actually do.
Absolutely. And I'm not shitting on all religious people or all religious so-called doctrine or whatever, because I know people that have faith and they have a good heart and they want to do good things, and that's very possible, and that happens in a lot of places.
I know a lot of wonderful Catholic and Christian and Jewish and Muslim people.
Absolutely. And Buddhists and all sorts of people. There's a lot of fantastic people. And so I'm not saying it's inherently bad. All I'm saying is that the connection with each other and ourselves in a religious standpoint stems from our connection with the hallucinogens and shamans in the past. So it's connected. And they're good pieces and bad pieces of everything, as we talk about, everything in moderation. So I want to make it clear, I'm not shitting on all religion and all religious people. All I'm doing is trying to show the connection between modern religion and past generic religion, which was a connection with hallucinogens. And I'm going to shit on some religious people. There's certainly, like Kyle said, there's so much war and hate, and that has to do with certain religions. So you have to look at the big picture. You have to look at everything.
You got to look at the historical record, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely.
The historical record speaks
for itself. Yeah.
I mean, the last time I checked, and maybe I'm just missing the information, but there was no, psilocybin religion where they murdered and killed people and went and jumped on ships and sailed across oceans and tried to be like, no, we're gonna, you need to, and if you don't, we're just gonna, that just, maybe I'm missing a big piece of information, but as near as I can tell, that never happened. Okay.
As near as I could tell too. Although I should make a little asterisk here. I should just point out that the past and that anthropology is a difficult science because it's based on theories from things that you find from the past, but we don't find everything. And you know why? There's a big pie of the past, and all we have from that pie is a small slice. Yeah. And so we're trying to determine things from that small slice. That's why history is so debatable, is because there's just a small piece of the pie that we know of. We don't know of all of history. But that being said, as far as I can tell, you're absolutely correct. So then fast forward. So then that brings us to the Industrial Revolution and modern times. I fast forwarded a lot. I'm going to skip a lot because we don't have a lot of time. But what happened then is, in the 20th century, you have modern science. You have the development of modern scientific techniques, and you have modern scientists making all sorts of discoveries, astronomical discoveries, physics discoveries, anthropological discoveries, chemical discoveries. And one of those chemical discoveries was certain drugs, and they isolated certain things, and they studied certain things, and they made LSD. And
lysergic acid diethylamide,
something like that. I think it's actually LSD 25 or something like that. And so these scientists started studying it, and they didn't study it from a point of view of it being illegal, or they didn't study it in a taboo sense. They did a lot of research on hallucinogens in the early part of the century, in the 50s and the 60s. They did a ton of research, and you can read about it. It's really interesting. And then
Albert Hoffman.
Yeah, Hoffman. Yep, absolutely. And then it became illegal. And then in the 60s, a lot of those hallucinogens became illegal. Marijuana, cannabis was illegalized decades before that. And so that research stopped. And we just lost a lot of ground. We couldn't figure out a lot of things because that research stopped. And it's interesting because if you look at when those hallucinogens were made illegal, they were made illegal in the 60s, when an alternative culture was rising against the war machine. There was a lot of straight-laced war machine American dudes, and there were these alternative hippies and other people like that that were taking hallucinogens, and the warmongers basically said, this is changing their culture, and we're not going to have it, and we're going to make this illegal, and we're going to discredit this movement. And that's exactly what they did. They discredited the anti-war movement, and they made a lot of the hallucinogens and drugs they were taking illegal. And that changed not just American history, but it changed world history as we know it in the last 50 years.
I remember reading something. I'll just jump in here for a quick second.
Please do.
I remember reading something that said that the military tried to work LSD over as sort of like, because it does have enhancement properties. LSD can, going back to what you said, or hallucinogens, let's say, because again, I'm not going to go full science here. I don't know which one, but hallucinogens, certain ones or all of them, they increase your visual acuity. They increase potentially other types of acuity. And, again, I keep on going back to this. Anecdotally, that's been my case. I remember when I was tripping out, I swear to God, I could hear a dog barking a long way away and a phone ringing a long way away. I'm convinced to this day it was really, really happening, and I otherwise would not have heard it. But I think I read something that where the military tried to appropriate and say, okay, well, maybe we could make like a super soldier kind of thing. You know what I mean? If they can hear better and see better. But the nature of I don't want to say drug, the substance, and the things that come along with the use of these substances doesn't lend itself to wartime applications.
Right.
Again, going back to this theme of sort of one side being a more volatile situation, and these things that we're talking about on the other side being more of a mystical, shamanistic, for lack of a better word, harmonious or peace-loving scenario. And I think that actually played into some of the early decisions by, we all know how much the military sort of dictates policy. So when they were unable to figure out how to use it in a wartime scenario, it's not a big stretch for me to understand based on what I know of, military experiments and technologies. If it's of no use to them, and in addition, it can be subversive, like it can lead to what you were saying, this group of people all of a sudden becoming anti-war, anti-imperialistic. Oh, well, we got to put the squash on that,
Yeah, it's
it's the tail of the tape, man.
Tail of the
tape. If you look closely, this is all documented.
Absolutely. And a lot of that information with the CIA doing these experiments, and they figured out a bunch of stuff, but the problem was that people couldn't conform. The people couldn't say, oh yeah, I'll go and do this assassination, because they were thinking for themselves, and they said, oh wait, these drugs aren't these drugs aren't allowing people to do what we want. They're allowing them to think for themselves, and so they couldn't control it.
Yeah. And it was also antithetical to their purposes too.
Right. Right.
I'd like to say that really, again, these are broad statements, but their purposes were, let's face it, they're nefarious.
Absolutely.
These are government purposes, which often are nefarious. And I think we're going to get into that based on your little humbus mumbus thing. But, on an individual level, they are nefarious purposes, and those substances and that kind of consciousness does not lend itself to nefarious purposes.
That's right.
It lends itself to elevated purposes and a higher level of consciousness, or at least a more harmonious level of consciousness.
You're absolutely correct, and that's really the baseline of why certain drugs are legal and why certain drugs are illegal. It has nothing to do with harm, because alcohol, as we've seen, alcohol and tobacco are some of the most harmful drugs in the entire planet, but they're legal. And cannabis and hallucinogens are some of actually the most benign drugs on the entire planet. Certainly, there are people that have hard times on them, but nowhere near the numbers. I mean, it's a false equivalency to say anywhere close to the
Mhm.
numbers of harm done by a hallucinogen or cannabis is anywhere close to alcohol or tobacco. It's a ridiculous statement to compare the two. So
Mhm.
that's exactly why one is legal and one is illegal. It has nothing to do with harm. It has to do with control and not control, of thinking for yourself and thinking for the your master, if that's the military or your religious leader or whoever. That's why drugs are legal or illegal. Straight
It's a,
up.
and it's a shame too. It makes you wonder how we got to this place. Why, maybe it ties into the idea, and this is totally not left field, but we didn't expect to talk about it. Maybe we are just inherently warlike. Maybe we just
Yeah,
can't get away from it. I
I
mean,
know.
we've had all this time and all this opportunity, and we always go back to the same awfulness. I mean, at every stage of humanity. And here we are in 2020, where we're still sort of like, okay, life is better for more people now than it's ever been in history, I'd like to think. Generally, like if you were to break it down in numbers, life is better for more people now, but there's still just so many cases of
So
awfulness
so
just
much
happening
suffering.
all the
So
time,
much suffering still.
you know? And it does make you wonder. I'm just going to just go back and revisit. You said something, and we had agreed on this, or we had not agreed on this, but we had sort of come to a commonality on this. We've lost anywhere from a half a century to a full century of precious R&D
Hmm.
on a couple of real magical, amazing substances. And I don't just mean for the mind, but I mean for physical. I mean, cannabis, you can make plastic, you can make rope, you can make oil, you can make paper, you can get high, you can use CBD to work on physical maladies. And we've lost 100 years of R&D on this incredible plant. And then obviously LSD, I mean, and other hallucinogens, let's say psilocybin as well. I should actually put that first because LSD is a little heavier. Um, I fully believe that we would be a more enlightened society if we had been able to not if we had been allowed to experiment with it. If it wasn't the sort of thing that became an incredible ultra high level taboo. I mean, as far as I know, maybe not now, but LSD was one of the most awful things you could ever get caught with in terms of like the penalties under the law. Like I think people served ridiculous jail sentences for just distributing and having LSD. And it's just, again, it's another outrageous thing,
Yeah, and there's
absolutely outrageous.
yeah, and there's so many people too. It's not just the law. It's this misinformation campaign. There are so many people that have a preconceived notion about LSD and hallucinogenic mushrooms, and they really have no idea what they're talking about because all they've heard is propaganda and
Horror.
misinformation put forth by, the people making it illegal, and it really has nothing to do with the reality of those things. And it's very sad because they're not bad people. They've just been horribly misinformed.
And what was that? What were the books that we were made to read? It wasn't Go. Was it Go Ask Alice, where they dosed her and she like committed
Oh yeah.
suicide?
I can't remember, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Something. And then I remember like in health class when I was a kid, they were like, oh, if you take LSD, you might be like the kid that took LSD and thought he could fly and flung himself
Right.
out the 8-story window. Or if
Right.
you take LSD, you might be like the kid that decided to stare into the sun for 8 hours and
Right.
ended up burning his fucking retinas out of his head. Well,
Right.
you know what? I did take LSD and I never wanted to jump out of an 8-story window. And I did take LSD and I never stared at the sun. I
But
looked at salamanders and earth and plants and water.
but how many kids, dealt with alcohol and had horrible, tragic things happen on alcohol? And yet
Like died in car crashes and stuff. A lot of them.
countless.
It's
countless.
terrible.
And so it's interesting, actually. There was a scientist pre-illegalization of LSD. I believe it was in the 50s or 60s, and I can't remember exactly when, and I can't remember the name.
You keep
So
on using that word, illegalization. I do not think it means what you think it means.
I do
I
not
think
think
what
you.
you want to say is criminalization.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm using it in a term of
I'm looking up illegalization right now.
I'm using it in a term of like of the law, as
I'm just
opposed
I know.
to making an individual. But I see what you mean. All
I'm
right,
being a dick.
that's fine. Be a dick. Criminalization, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Thanks, Kyle. So this dude, and this is again, like Kyle said, this is somewhat anecdotal, but this was a real study. I've seen the study. I've seen the numbers. I just can't remember the name of the gentleman that carried it through. Is he studied? He studied LSD on alcoholics, and he found that almost 50% of the alcoholics that he gave LSD to changed their ways, that they were on the path to not be alcoholics.
Yep.
And then they were helped. And in his study, almost 50% of these people stopped being alcoholics because of LSD. And so
Yep.
it's not something that you take just to trip out. These have real and scientifically backed you know things that you can do to help each other.
And can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question for our viewers? And I'm going to guess the answer to this, but it's not like you're substituting regular LSD use for alcohol use for the rest of your life, correct?
Absolutely, you're absolutely
It's
correct.
that the certain types of medicinal and or controlled use of hallucinogenics helped cure destructive alcoholic behavior, but it's not replacing destructive alcoholic behavior. It's not like these people have to stay on acid all the time.
That's right. You're not only are you correct, but that's a really good thing to specify and to tell the people at home, because we're making assumptions that people understand what we're saying. But you're right. It has nothing to do with the replacement of the drug. It's using a different drug. What's that?
It's a treatment.
Right. It's using a certain drug for treatment, and it wasn't even high doses. It was fairly low doses.
They call it microdosing.
Right. It was a little bit more than microdosing. It wasn't like a tripping out dose. It was more like, it was like half or a quarter of that. And then it got even smaller. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's like, if you're taking a pharmaceutical drug and you're doing a lot, and then you do a little, and then you end it. And that was how it was being used to help people. And there's other studies that they were getting into with hallucinogenics. I believe psilocybin with helping schizophrenics and helping things like that. So
PTSD is something else
and
that I know.
PTSD,
Yep.
absolutely.
That's
Yep.
a huge one. I mean, people that it's so funny too, because there's so many people that out there that are like, oh, cherish our veterans. I'm one of them. And we have to watch out for these people. And yet those same people often are so staunchly opposed to not experiments, but treatments of this
Alternative.
nature, because they have been deemed negative, illegal, whatever, for, again, crooked purposes back in the day. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? And
It's
we're
like
still living in that world where we aren't getting the benefits of these things, which are extremely beneficial. We're missing that whole part of it.
absolutely. It's like a tool. You have a toolkit, and we're missing a bunch of tools.
Right. We took out the pliers and the box
Right.
wrenches.
And so no one's saying, like, I'm not saying like, oh, everyone should be on acid or mushrooms or this
No,
or that.
of
We're not
course
saying
not.
that at all. We're saying this is an important part of a toolkit of human consciousness and medicinal tools, an important part that's been eliminated or stifled. And
And for no good reason. Let's add that too.
Yeah,
I mean,
no good reason.
I mean, okay, so I don't have numbers in front of me. A lot of this show is like making claims without the numbers. But we know the numbers, damn it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'll bet you $20, anybody, right now, that the numbers are low when it comes to something like, oh, people that take hallucinogens and go out and get in a car wreck, or go out and jump off a cliff, or go out and get in a fight with baseball bats. You know what I mean? Like, those numbers are just like really, really far down. And I would even take it one step further in saying the percentages are far down. So, you know, because people are like, well, nobody takes them and tons of people drink alcohol. That's why the numbers are down. Well, no, let's go with a percentage then. I defy anybody to prove it otherwise. The simple truth is that, you know, going back to these alignments that we've had that you put forward, Tony, and which make perfect sense, you have one side of things, which is harmonious and nice and interesting and expanding. And you have another side that is stifling and violent. And listen, you've seen 4 podcasts now. I'm a big fan, you know, but I'm lucky I don't use it in a destructive manner, or it's manageable. But on a societal level, it is mind-boggling that we have vilified these things and championed these other things.
Right.
Championed.
And that's what it's
our
about.
racing teams, our
Right.
advertisements,
Right.
our pop culture.
Right.
They all prop up smoking and drinking, which I love both of, but but I do realize 100% that it's destructive.
And no one's saying, like, I'm not saying that alcohol and tobacco should be illegal. I'm just saying
you better not be.
I'm just saying that hallucinogens should also, not only should all drugs be legal, but they should be studied and they should be respected, and they should
100%.
understand how they affect us. So
100%.
alcohol and tobacco will always be with us now. It's, you know, that the thing that happened in human history where we discovered alcohol and it kind of changed the course of history. It is what it is, and we're never going back. But it should be respected and understood, just like hallucinogens, just like everything else, and not put on a pedestal, put alcohol on a pedestal and put, you know, hallucinogens in the basement. It's just, it's been the wrong path.
Especially if you and I are making the point that that hallucinogens are actually in the long run of a much, much greater value to human existence and human advancement. And I think we are saying that.
That's exactly what we're saying.
I think we are definitely saying that.
Yeah.
This is bullshit.
That's exactly what we're saying. And just to tie it back to what I said at the beginning of the show, what hallucinogens can do, and cannabis on a different level too, but really hallucinogens, it's really about, that's the big one. What they do is they open up your piece of pie. They open up your reality. They give you a bigger piece of the pie. And as I've said multiple times on this show, a greater understanding of our reality leads to a lot of good things. It leads to a better understanding of who we are, a better understanding of who our friends and brothers and our sisters and everyone in the culture, a better understanding who that is. And so that's why I'm championing being a champion for hallucinogens, is so it makes us better people and it opens up our reality. And so we think it's very important.
Yeah. And I, you know, just to put it in a quick thing, descriptive thing, I think they make a nice navigational aid. Going back to the river, okay? Yeah. We all know life is, you know, you're on it. Yeah, you can control it, but only so much. So it's like a river, and these things could be a navigational aid. Right. They can help you move in a direction that is more in tune with the things around you.
Yeah, for sure. And we need that research so other people can help people with it. Not everybody is like, oh, I don't know what to do. I'm frightened. Well, if you had good research and good people who were knowledgeable, then you wouldn't be as frightened because they could help you. But we don't have a lot of that help because it's been stifled. And so that's what we need too. You know, we need more. And I think there are more scientists, excuse me, who are coming back in the mainstream a little bit, just a little bit, but it's nowhere near where it should be.
Well, we need governments to kind of lead the way and
Right.
open up to things, you know what I mean? And to a degree, they are, they are. Like, our society is moving in that direction, I feel like,
I think
very slowly and very
yeah,
incrementally.
I think with cannabis, I think American society is opening up to cannabis and the benefits of it. And so I'm hoping that hallucinogens are next.
Yes, me too. Absolutely, me too.
And everyone will still unless we live in a horrible dictatorship, which is possible,
Quite possible.
quite possible. Unless we live in a horrible dictatorship, everyone's going to have the freedom to still do whatever drugs they want. But if you think that you don't do drugs, I don't think that's correct, because every single person, including myself, has some sort of drug. Every single person I know. There's not one person I know that doesn't have a mind-altering substance that they deal with every day. It's just, we need to better understand these substances and understand why we do them, why they're here, and how they affect us. And that's what we need. We need a better understanding.
I dare say that if more people took hallucinogens once, twice, or lots, they would have a certain level of perspective that was elevated about that.
Yeah.
And it sort of breaks down these seemingly impermeable membranes that separate one type of society from another type of society. You know what I mean? It's there's more flow. It gives you a heightened sense of perspective,
Mm-hmm.
For me, it allowed me to sort of zoom out and look at things and say, all right, well, you got to change your perspective from time to time.
That's exactly what it does. It forces you to change your perspective from time to time. And get a little bit more piece of that pie, Kyle.
I haven't eaten any of the pie for a long time.
Neither have I.
But I suppose if I found myself in the right place, I always have it in my mind to do them again. I had a short and intense and good and beneficial and positive run. That's what I had. That was my experience with it.
I'm in the same boat.
Everybody is different, and we are all in. We're all in a position to benefit from a little bit more openness in talking about it, doing it, using it, exploring it. For me, based on when we have lived, that was my experience. It was mind expanding, and it was interesting and really, really fun. I can say that. I had a lot of fun. And I shut it off like a light switch. Naturally. It happened completely naturally. I didn't have to fight against it. It wasn't like, oh, I want to do that so much more, but I'm going to control myself because I'm a lunatic. No, nothing like that. I got to a point and I was like, wow, that was a really formative experience over the course of several months. And I said, that's pretty much good. Since then, maybe in the following 10 years, there was one or two much, much more milder, a handful of milder experiences. And then, for the last 10 or 15 years, I not touched any of it.
Yeah, I have actually a very similar experience.
Although, and we're not going into this right now, but something that we should tackle, maybe in our sort of theme where we decided we were going to recap things, DMT.
Which is interesting. So DMT, for the folks at home, I can't remember the full dimethylated tryptamine. What is it called?
Yeah.
DMT is naturally found in the human brain. DMT is one of the most powerful hallucinogens on the planet, and it's naturally found in our brain.
It's naturally found in all sorts of places.
Yeah. What
it's
does that tell you?
Naturally found in like regular grass and other plants and like, I don't know, other naturally, like, I don't know. I think you can find DMT in sand and shit. I don't know. It's crazy.
It's a crazy thing. It's an interesting thing. So, and you know what too? I think that if there was research, I think that it would find that microdosing and different things, hallucinogens could be in things that would help people as they get older. I'm in the same boat as you. You know, it was many years ago, and I had, you know, I'm the things that I do, I try and live a cleaner lifestyle, and so I'm trying to reduce my drug intake, whatever that means. But I think that research would show that microdosing hallucinogens and putting it in certain things would help us as we get older. I bet that's the case.
And also, I mean, I know you can close up anytime, but I would ask you this: haven't your experiences with hallucinogens had staying power?
Oh, for sure.
Haven't
Absolutely.
they had lasting
Yeah.
psychological and beneficial psychological? I don't know what the next word is, but like it's part of how you move through reality.
For sure. And it's something that it's like, it's in my toolkit. It's in
Yeah,
my, it's permanently in my toolkit of
toolkit.
the pie of understanding reality. I can go back and open up those synapse connections that were created from that time in my life, you know. And when I'm having a hard time, and when I'm like, oh man, like I don't know if this is smarter, and I can kind of open that toolkit up and use it.
Toolkits and pies, baby.
Toolkits and pies, baby. That's what we
No,
do.
no, it's so true, and you can't say the same thing about all the other awful stuff that you may or may
No.
have done that I definitely did do. You
Are you
know,
kidding me?
I
Like
mean,
blackout drunk? There's no toolkit from being blackout drunk.
no. Well, there's no. It's more of like a process of elimination. It's like,
Yeah.
don't do that again.
Yeah.
You know, like that. What not to do.
Right.
Don't
Right.
do that again.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
great. Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. I had unprotected sex and had a baby. Wonderful.
Oh
Like,
boy. Oh pal.
I'm sorry.
You're
I believe
spitballing
alcohol is a particular lubricant for something along those lines.
for sure. So now that's an interesting point. Okay. I think we made our point. We're gonna move on because we made our point, but I think we are gonna come back to it at a different show because this is super important and interesting. But it's we've talked about it for a while, so we're gonna move on. We don't have a lot of time, but I do want to do some 80s movies wisdom. So we like to talk about 80s movies wisdom, and this
favorite part of the show.
boom, boom, boom. If you made it this far, thank you. We love you. The 80s movies have so much wisdom to offer, and I think this is a cool thing to talk about. I'm going to keep talking about it. So we've talked about Conan the Barbarian, and I was tempted to talk about another Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, but I want to give Arnold a break. Let's give Arnold the rest here. So we're going to move on to
Cast you on the Valhalla and laugh at you.
we're going to move on to Back to the Future. Back to the Future, I think, is a very good movie in the zeitgeist or whatever. So no, it's a fun movie. And I think weren't 2 and 3 were like the 90s. So I think it kind of breaks my 80s thing.
Well, no. Well, you know, it's interesting. You should ask that.
Okay.
I don't even think that they broke in the 90s because Back to the Future came out in 1985, or
Okay.
very, very shortly thereafter. It took place in 1985. I think it was maybe 1985 or 1986. And then we waited 3 years, maybe even as close to 4 years. And then 2 and 3 came out together because they filmed them together. So it was a long wait while they filmed 2 movies,
Right,
and then released them almost stacked against each other.
close to the 90s.
And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure it all fell in the 80s. Although, internet, do your thing. Come at me, bruh.
So you know what else is fun about Back to the Future is they go into the future in Back to the Future 2 to 2015.
Yeah, which is like 5 years
fucking
ago.
5 years ago,
and
man.
We're just not even.
Where's the flying cars?
Close.
Where's my fucking hoverboard, man?
Yeah, hoverboard and holograms and flying cars.
Yeah.
And Gray's Sports Almanac.
So none of that shit's around. But what happened there was a scene in Back to the Future 2 where Biff He's the alternate timeline Biff. He's rich Biff. He gets Gray's Sports Almanac, and Marty jumps off the building onto the DeLorean, but Biff thinks he killed himself because he was going to shoot him. We're doing a quick synapse here. And and Biff watches him go off the building, and he says, "Idiot." And that saying, that term, the way that he said it is so great. And it makes me want to call people idiots. Now, Kyle, are there certain things that you call idiot?
All the time. I mean, all the time. And I do it in a very Biff-like fashion, as if to say, like, how could you not have realized that what you were doing? God, it's hard to explain. Yes. The funny thing is that it's not just people that I call idiots. Sometimes I call, like, animals idiots. And it just doesn't make sense to everybody. But I have always found it to be comical. So, if a fly is buzzing around and it's going around in circles, and then it flies into the window, I might say, idiot. Fly doesn't know it's an idiot. How could it? It's not a human. It doesn't have the concept of idiocy. But for whatever reason, it gives me a certain amount of pleasure and comical relief to just be like, I don't know, idiot. There's something about it that, I don't know, you channel this Biff-like sort of simplicity, I guess I would call it. A Biff-like simplicity.
Biff-like simplicity.
A Biff-like simplicity. And my friend used it in an email the other day. So I think we might have discussed, I got involved in a motorcycle accident early this summer. I did tremendous damage to my shoulder. Poor son of a gun. My poor shoulder. It's part of my body. It has no consciousness at all. It can't think for itself. It's me. My shoulder is me. I am it, and it is me, and I am him. But my friend Matthew wrote me, and he said, "Hey, how's your idiot shoulder doing?" And I laughed out loud, because why would you call a shoulder an idiot? It's so silly. It's so outrageous, And I just took it from Biff, Like anything, something stupid happens, idiot. I don't know. I can't help it.
So Biff like simplicity. I'm gonna take some winding turns for this wisdom. So the wisdom of this is that as humans, we are discriminatory animals, and I don't mean that like in a giant sense of race or anything. I mean that in a small sense. Like, we're discriminatory about what food we eat and which way to walk and this and that. These teeny small decisions that we make every single day that affect our lives. And when you can just sit back and watch a fly hit the wall and smack itself, or fly into a fan or whatever, and just watch this and just say, idiot, that decision, that judgment that you've made as a human, I think is special. I think there's some wisdom in that judgment. Again, I told you this was a twisting turn to wisdom, so I'm not saying that this is the fucking wisest thing in the world, but it's just a moment of clarity that as humans we should enjoy calling things idiot.
Yeah. Well, and we will always do it. It's actually, you know what? I would say it's better to call things other than people idiots.
Right.
Because first of all, they're not going to understand what the hell you're talking about. So they'll just go about their business. You might not get a punch in the nose the way you might, if you said that to a person. It's like, take these opportunities to enjoy the lesser intelligence of subordinate creatures, perhaps.
Yeah.
And then that way you won't have to deliver to your other, your fellow man, I don't know, until
Perfect.
maybe it's really, really necessary.
Perfect. I love it. That's exactly right. That's perfect. We're going to end the show on that, because Kyle just hit the nail on the head, and and we've run out of time. And thank you, Kyle, for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Tony. It's been a lot of fun, as usual.
This has been the Holographic Podcast, and we are signing off.